Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we're taking a look at our Day 1 Alioth Theory Crafts. Alioth is the only new card releasing in Series 5 for the month of September, and looks to be a pretty powerful one to boot. It is a 6 cost 5 power that reads, on reveal, destroy all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed cards. So definitely seems like it could be a strong addition to the right deck. And if we take a look at the Spotlight week here below, we can see the other cards featured during this week are the recently buffed Snow Guard as well as Hit Monkey. So in my opinion, I think if you want at least 2 out of the 3 cards here, this is probably going to be the best week of the month, as I think the overall card quality here is the highest we have on offer in any given week in the month of September, and getting a Series 5 card out of your Spotlight caches is always a bit better than a Series 4 one, as those are at least a little bit more affordable with tokens, whereas Series 5 cards tend to feel like they're out of reach of a lot of the player base because tokens just aren't a very prevalent resource anymore. Now, do I think this is a card people should be picking up or it's going to be really amazing day one? I'm not super sold on this card being amazing right away in the context of the meta we're currently experiencing. Loki is pulling off a lot of shenanigans right now, and I have a sneaking suspicion that your opponent stealing an Alioth and reducing it by 1 or 2 costs with Loki is going to make for some pretty frustrating experiences. So I don't personally think this card is going to actually make a very large impact on the meta we currently have. However, I think it's a card that's going to probably get better over time, especially after Loki probably gets justifiably adjusted. But yeah, for the time being, I don't think it's going to make huge waves, but I think long term it has a lot of potential, mainly in the Galactus archetype, but there are some other uses for it as well. I highly recommend checking out the article from Safety Blade in the description below, going a bit more in-depth on all of the decks, and as always, you can just grab the code to import them into the game from there. But yeah, let's get into our Day 1 Theory Craft decks for Alioth. So, as I mentioned at the start of the video here, Galactus is going to be, I think, the main home for this card. Being able to get out Galactus early with Wave, or just Electro ramping, Psylocke ramping, and then using Alioth to close out the game seems like it's going to be rather strong, and I think that's what a lot of people are going to be aiming to do with the card. This first list is pretty all in on Galactus. We have some decent early game cards to help us manage priority a little bit, such as Nebula, Green Goblin, and Jeff. Wolverine acts as an additional payoff if we have to Galactus on the final turn, and has decent synergy with Destroyer, who is pretty good in cases where we're going to be relying on that backup plan of like Nimrod. We also have the recently buffed Forge as another way to give some excess power to either our Nimrod or just our Galactus to make sure he actually satisfies the condition of winning the lane in order for his effect to go off. Electro and Wave are going to be our standard ramp pieces. Green Goblin and Hobgoblin help clog up the opponent's lanes with some negative power, so we have a better chance at getting Galactus off. Nimrod, good with Galactus, but also enables a pretty decent backup plan alongside Destroyer. We can use Electro to ramp out Nimrod on turn 4, followed up with Destroyer on 5, and close out with Alioth on turn 6. And obviously the G-Man himself is going to be how you're trying to close out a lot of games here. Most decks aren't really designed around winning one lane, and as previously mentioned, being able to follow up a Galactus with an Alioth is probably going to win you the game a lot of the time. If you're not as into Galactus, another interesting direction you can go is a full-on destroy deck. The idea with this one is we are trying to destroy as many things as possible. That's why we're including Squirrel Girl, a card that hasn't really seen a ton of play in Destroy for a good while since the old Death Wave ended up falling off. But this is just a super destroy focused deck with the goal of being able to get our death down to 2 or cheaper cost going into turn 5, so we can slam death, slam wave, and then close out the game with Alioth or America Chavez. X23 is also a nice little bonus include here, as it gives us a way to potentially cheat Alioth out earlier on in the game. If we blow her up on turn 4, we can play Alioth on turn 5 and close it out with Chavez or Death and some of our destroy cards on the final turn of the game. But yeah, not too much else to say about this one. It's a very standard destroy focused list, so if you like playing destroy and you want to run Alioth in it but don't really want to go the Galactus route, definitely suggest giving this one a try. Next up, we have Thanos Control. Unfortunately, Thanos has kind of fallen off the radar of a lot of players after the recent Soulstone nerf. Remains to be seen how much the deck has been actually impacted by that change, However, if there's a deck that seems like Alioth could be a solid inclusion into, I think Thanos Control is one of those lists. Thanos Control has always thrived off of using things like Psylocke or the Time Stone in order to cheat powerful late game cards out ahead of curve. Usually it's been a 5-drop on turn 4, but now with Alioth we have the potential of cheating out a powerful 6-drop on turn 5 as well. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Thanos Control type of list. We have some powerful tech cards here in Cosmo and Shang-Chi for good interaction, Blue Marvel to buff up our going wide board, Dino to take advantage of our large hand size, X to seal a lane early on in the game, Claw to spread the power around the board, Vision for some decent flexibility, keeping our opponent guessing where we're going to be committing our points before the final turn, Jeff being Jeff, and obviously Thanos here, mainly for the stones, but sometimes just as a decent turn 6 play. I think Lad is particularly interesting with Alioth, as that could be a potentially really good high roll. However, obviously in a Thanos deck, we have a lot of stones in the deck. Your chance of hitting any one of these specific cards with Lad is always going to be smaller than if you're just playing a non-Thanos deck. Then we have the Move Wave deck, using Alioth as another closer for the final turn of the game. This was one of my favorite decks last season. I think it's a little unfortunate that the way the meta has shifted post-Loki has made this deck kind of fall off a bit. I think the core of it is still really strong, and it'll probably be strong again once things are a little bit more balanced. But right now, I do think this deck isn't quite as favorable as it was last month. That aside, I think it's still a really fun deck to play if you like moving cards around the board and getting payoff for doing that. If you miss playing Arrow, I think this is probably the best deck to be playing Arrow in. And the general idea of the deck is we're trying to get out a bunch of effective stats for their cost early on in the game, so that way we are ahead going into the 5th turn, slam down Wave, and then close with one of our late game cards such as Arrow, Alioth, or Dr. Doom. Previously, we ran Magneto as a way to interact with 4-cost cards and go tall on the final turn, but there aren't really as many Zabu decks going around, so I think the value of moving those 4-cost cards around has gone down a bit. So perhaps using Alioth is just a way to guarantee a lane on the final turn when the opponent can only play 1 card. Makes it a pretty appealing finisher in this style of deck. And of course, the variety we have here with Arrow and Doom makes it hard for the opponent to consistently play around which one of our final game effects we're going to be using to try and win on the last turn. And last but not least, we have the classic Sandman Ramp. This is a deck that hasn't really had too much time in the spotlight recently. However, a lot of players are hoping that Alioth kind of brings it back a bit, and I could definitely see that potentially happening, as Alioth really seems to benefit from decks that are able to cheat it out earlier or use it as a final finisher after cheating out other big impactful things. The early game of this deck is pretty standard for this archetype. We run Nebula and Jeff as our main 2 cheap cards, Electro and Wave as our main 2 ramp pieces. Our 5-drops that we're trying to ramp into on turn 4 are Devil Dino, Sandman, and Panther. Sandman is particularly decent right now against the Loki decks. However, still can be kind of dangerous if they get ahead before you get Sandman out, so you do want to keep that in mind a bit, especially because they will have access to your cards a lot of the time as well, and if they're ahead, it's usually pretty easy for them to stay ahead. The fact that we aren't playing a ton of cards out usually means our Devil Dino will be pretty big. Black Panther goes really nice with Zola, and it's just another decent thing for us to cheat out earlier on in the game. It's a lot more impactful getting it down on turn 4 as opposed to turn 5 when it normally comes out. And then our 6-drops, we have Alioth, of course, Leader as a way to basically just win the game when we're already ahead going into the final turn, or just to help us stay ahead on the 5th turn of the game if we got that Electro ramp. Galactus as just a way to scam some games if we just get our Electro or our Wave and our opponent doesn't play around it. Galactus also enables some mind games with Alioth, where if you Wave and you're expecting your opponent to know you're going to play Galactus and play their big thing, you could instead opt to play Alioth to just blow up that big thing while putting 5 power into the lane, and potentially rebuy the effect later on with something like Odin or Arnim Zola. Zola is obviously great here for the combo with Black Panther, and is just generally rather strong with the majority of our 6-drops here. Heck, you could even go for an early Galactus, and then the following turn, if it didn't work out, you could use Zola to put Galactus in 2 other lanes to hopefully get that effect off on the second go around. And there we have it. That is going to wrap it up for our day 1 theory crafts for Alioth. Again, I think this is the best spotlight week of the month if you want at least 2 of these cards in the long term. think they're all pretty impactful, powerful cards that are a lot of fun to play, and even though I'm not the most hopeful that Alioth is going to make a huge impact right away, I think it's going to be pretty strong as time goes on and different changes happen to the balance of the game. Again, highly recommend checking out the article in the description below if you want to check out any more information about the decks listed here, or if you just want to grab the code to import into the game. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know what you think about Alioth in the comments below. Are you picking it up? Are you passing it? Is there a build you're thinking about that we didn't feature here? I'd love to hear it. That's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned here at Marvel Snap Zone for all your Marvel Snap content. I'm Zombies. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.